Good luck, James. It was the sports day at my niece's school, and an unfamiliar woman was cheering on my husband with enthusiasm. My husband was participating in the competition with the woman and her child. My mind went blank when I saw that scene right in front of me. Why is my husband, who should be on a business trip, here? Unable to contain the rising anger, I vowed revenge against my husband. My name is Mia. I'm a 27-year-old housewife and I work full-time. I met my husband, James, a company employee, at a matchmaking party and we got married. He is 35 years old, and 8 years older than me. Though there is a bit of an age gap, he is understanding and has a calm demeanor. When we first met, he didn't say much, but I was attracted to him as he listened to me sincerely. And we started dating. Our relationship was great, and we got married after dating only for 3 months. My husband's job involves frequent business trips, making him very busy. As a result, all household matters are entrusted to me. Since I work full-time, I'm busy, but I diligently handle the housework every day for the sake of my beloved husband. While the early days of married life were enjoyable, my husband, who is busy, started spending weekends away on business trips, creating a rift between us gradually. This week, I have a business trip from Friday through the weekend. Huh? Again? Didn't you just go on a business trip last week? It can't be helped. It's work. Don't nag at me. My husband, unable to hide his irritation towards my question, glared at me. While I understand that my husband's job is demanding, I can't help but express my frustration when he goes on business trips this often. Perhaps due to his reserved nature, my husband often raises his voice when displeased. As I am not the type to stay silent, I tend to retort, and we have been getting into more and more arguments lately. With that, just 1 year into our marriage, the atmosphere between us has become tense. On weekends, I'm bored if I stay home alone, so I often visit my brother's house nearby. He and his wife have a 7-year-old daughter, Ella. Because I have been around her since she was a baby, I adore her. The other day, she said that she wanted to come to my house, so I organized a sleepover at my place, on a weekend when my husband wasn't on a business trip. Since my niece is attached to me, we had a close relationship, almost like sisters with an age gap. While I'm lonely because my relationship with my husband is bad, my niece became a precious source of joy, providing companionship and happiness. As we spent many weekends together, I often took my niece with me when I visited my in-laws who lived in the same town. My in-laws were kind people and always gave us snacks when we visited. My niece really liked my in-laws, and they also showered her with affection. One day, when I visited my brother's house as usual, I noticed that my niece seemed down. Concerned, I asked her the reason. Mia, you know, we have a sports day coming up at school, but only Mom can come for me. Dad has to work, and Grandpa and Grandma are far away, so they can't come. She explained. Oh, I see. That must be a bit sad for you, I replied. According to my niece, other classmates would have not only their parents but also grandparents attending the sports day. And she is sad that her mom would be the only one attending from her family. My parents, who are her grandparents, had moved to Vancouver, making it difficult for them to come here. However, I thought, maybe I can go. I quickly checked my schedule, and fortunately, I would be free next Sunday. Might as well, I took out my phone and called my mother-in-law. To my delight, they didn't have any plan on that day, and they agreed to come to my niece's sports day. When I conveyed the news to my niece, she instantly brightened up, returning to her usual cheerful self with great joy. That night, I shared the story of my niece's sports day with my husband. Whether he was listening or not, he didn't bother to look my way and simply declined, citing his business trip. While my husband's attitude was nothing new, I felt deeply disappointed on that particular day. Desperate to capture even a bit of his attention, I found myself talking about how cute my niece was and other things that he didn't even ask. You've been chattering away incessantly. Do you want a kid or something? Just so you know, I have no intention of having one. My husband suddenly said. You don't have to say it like that, I replied. Perhaps my husband was offended by my words, and he glared at me, looking annoyed. I was terribly shocked by his unexpected statement, as I had always assumed that he would want children in the future. As I remained silent, holding back tears, my husband, perhaps in a bad mood, began to verbally abuse me. Why did he have to say such things? Determined not to cry in front of him, I desperately held back bitter tears. I bit my lip in response to my husband's abusive words, enduring it with all my might. After venting his frustrations with a round of complaints, my husband muttered to himself and left the room. At that moment, I broke down and cried on the spot. All the things I had been holding back inside me poured out. Somewhere in my heart, I had probably hoped that having a child would somehow improve our relationship. My husband not only completely denied that hope, but also insulted me, rubbing salt into the wound. I was miserable and I couldn't stop crying. In the end, I cried for hours until near dawn, welcoming the morning with swollen eyes. My husband paid no attention to me in such state, and left for his business trip. Then came the day of my niece's sports day. I headed to my niece's elementary school with the lunch I had prepared the night before. My sister-in-law went to my niece's school early in the morning and had reserved a spot for us, so we were able to watch the event from the front row of the cheering section. My in-laws also arrived early so that they can witness my niece's performance. My sister-in-law thanked them, and with a brief exchange of greetings, we all became engrossed in my niece's achievements. She is a fast runner just like her father. She ran with amazing speed in the short distance run, breezing through the finish line with flair. As she waved and smiled, we applauded and cheered. As the sports day reached its midpoint, it was time for the parent-child activities. To capture the moments of my niece and sister-in-law's performances, I began preparing my camera. Their turn was approaching, and I leaned forward, readying my camera at the perfect angle. Then, an unbelievable sight caught my eye. To my surprise, I saw my husband. He was participating in an event with an unfamiliar boy. My mind went blank, and I stared at my husband in a daze for a while. I had no idea what was happening. My husband made a gesture as if nudging the boy, and they were laughing together, appearing quite friendly. Go for it, James! A woman appeared and shouted my husband's name. It seemed to be the mother of the boy, and my husband and the boy waved at her. I couldn't believe the scene unfolding before my eyes. Why did he lie about going on a business trip and he is with a family I don't know? Gradually, anger welled up inside me, and my chest tightened. At this point, I thought, screw it! I shouted my husband's name at the top of my lungs and started cheering. My in-laws, who were next to me, seemed surprised when I suddenly started shouting my husband's name. Martha, John, would you cheer for James with me? I asked. Mia, what's the matter all of a sudden? Oh, Mia. Today is your niece's sports day, right? Why are you shouting his name suddenly? Unable to comprehend, my in-laws stared at me. I was too angry to speak, so I silently pointed in the direction of my husband. Looking puzzled, my in-laws looked at the direction I was pointing at, and their eyes widened. Well, of course. They saw a boy they have never seen before with my husband there. With a firmer tone than before, I asked my in-laws to cheer for my husband once again. Exchanging glances, my in-laws pondered. Then, as if determined, my father-in-law shouted my husband's name even louder than me, and started cheering. My mother-in-law seemed hesitant for a moment, but, after a while, following my father-in-law's lead, she began cheering for my husband loudly. Our voices were quite loud, so we stood out in the audience, attracting the attention of those around us. and finally, it was my husband's turn in the competition. I shouted my husband's name even louder. Taking the baton from the boy, my husband ran towards the finish line. When he rounded the corner, in front of the stands, he was surprised at the sight of my in-laws and I shouting loudly. That moment, my husband's feet tangled, and he fell hard just before reaching the finish line. Other people passed him, and it seems my husband ended up in last place. After that, my husband was crouching down for a while, but he quickly left the scene, without looking at my in-laws and me. I stood up from my seat, determined not to let him get away, and chased after my husband who was leaving. Then, I spotted him sitting in the school council seats a little distance away. Even from a distance, my husband's face looked pale, and he seemed to be trembling slightly. A woman appeared there, comforting my husband, and talking to him with a concerned expression on her face. The woman efficiently started treating my husband's wounds, seemingly engaged in conversation with him. Judging from their closeness, it was evident that there was something going on between them. "James!" I thought there's no better time, so I called out to my husband. After he flinched for a moment, my husband turned towards me. The expression on his face at that moment was a frightened expression, as if he had seen a demon. In fact, my face probably looked like a demon, because I was enraged. On top of that, my in-laws, wearing a demonic expression, appeared from behind me. "James, what's going on here? Dad, and Mia too, why are you here?" My father-in-law confronted my husband in an angry manner. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, perhaps didn't want to speak to my husband, and she just glared at him without saying anything. My husband, who has always acted so arrogantly towards me, was now cowering like a mouse. I felt pathetic, and tears were about to well up. My father-in-law lost his patience with my husband, who was in a panic and didn't get the point, and he was about to grab him. Then, my husband finally confessed as if he gave in. It turns out that the woman and my husband are in a common law relationship. The boy is the child of the woman, who is a single mother, and not my husband's child. However, the boy seems to consider my husband as his father since he frequently visits their home. The relationship between my husband and the woman started before I got married to him. After we got married, he would lie that he would go on business trips and spend time at the woman's place. My husband didn't want to support a child, but he wanted to maintain the relationship with her. So, he pretended to be single, and have been getting away with it until now. Faced with my husband's selfish argument, I was speechless in disbelief. If my husband listened to what I was telling him the other day, the worst-case scenario, which is meeting here like this, could have been avoided. I was so angry at my husband's stupidity, for not remembering the day of my niece's sports day, and for showing up like a fool. Then, at that moment, a question popped into my head. If he had a girlfriend, why did he marry me? I was more curious why he married me than being upset about him having a girlfriend even before we got married. We met at a matchmaking party. It's not a place for people already in relationships. If you had a girlfriend, you should have married her. Why did you marry me? I didn't want to get married, actually. But what can you do? My parents were pressuring me to get married quickly, and there was no way that I was going to support a child. Without any remorse, my husband said to me. His words were so shocking that I crumbled to the ground on my knees. All the efforts I made to get along with my husband, what were they for? To make matters worse, my husband deflected blame for his actions onto his parents, which was a cowardly thing to do. It was beyond despicable. At this point, I began to doubt my husband's character rather than being angry. At that moment, my father-in-law, who had been silently listening to our exchange, grabbed my husband's collar and knocked him down with a punch. My husband crashed into chairs, collapsing dramatically. Following my father-in-law, my mother-in-law started hitting my husband's head hard. She shed tears and apologized to me while hitting him. I couldn't forgive my husband for causing such pain to my kind in-laws. Then, the woman joined in. Up until that moment, she didn't know that my husband was already married and she had believed they were soon to be married. Feeling deceived, she started attacking my husband. No wonder. My husband not only hurt the woman but also hurt her child. She had a good reason to hit him. Even when I found out about my husband's relationship with the woman, I couldn't bring myself to blame her. Considering what my husband had done, she was a victim just like me. After we beat the hell out of him, he apologized while crying. Just because he apologized, it doesn't mean that he is forgiven, but our anger had somewhat subsided. So we left. After that, my husband and I got divorced, of course. Initially, my husband resisted paying alimony, but after being strongly admonished by my in-laws, he eventually agreed, and I received a substantial amount of alimony. Additionally, it turned out that my ex-husband had hinted at marriage to the woman, and he had been receiving money from her. As a result, she filed a marriage fraud lawsuit against him. To have the charges dropped, my ex-husband had to pay a settlement, accumulating more debts. Additionally, the entire scandal became known at his workplace, leading to my ex-husband being removed from the fast track to promotion. With a reduced salary, my ex-husband found it difficult to repay his debts. He apparently pleaded with my in-laws for help. However, my in-laws turned him away when he came to their house, refusing to offer any support. Having completely given up on my ex-husband due to this incident, my in-laws decided to sever all ties with him. Hearing this story from my in-laws, I was thoroughly disgusted at what a selfish man he was. My ex-husband, managing on a meager salary, was struggling to repay his debts and facing financial difficulties. Considering my ex-husband's actions, he brought it upon himself, and I can't find any room for sympathy. As for me, I had been extremely tense and finally snapped after the divorce. I barely managed to go to work, and I just stayed home most of the time on weekends. However, what saved me was the presence of my niece. "Mia, you seem a bit down. How about I share some of my energy with you?" "Thank you, Ella. Thanks to you, Auntie feels a lot better." I gently hugged my niece, who was looking at me with sparkling eyes. That's right. There's no use dwelling on things. I should just look forward, because I have a long life ahead of me. Thanks to my niece, I regained my vitality, and I started enjoying weekends playing with her and pursuing my hobbies, just like in the old days. Several months after the divorce, my sister-in-law mentioned that she had someone she wanted to introduce me to. At first, I was surprised by the unexpected suggestion, but after gathering courage, I decided to meet him. The man was the complete opposite of my ex-husband, always making me laugh, and he was attentive to details. He gently embraced me, knowing that I had become distrustful of people after the incident with my ex-husband. Thanks to him, I started thinking that maybe I can trust people once again. Now, it's time to head out. I looked at the clock and opened the front door with enthusiasm. It is a sunny day with no clouds today. It is a perfect day for a date. Currently, I am living a fulfilling life, enjoying both work and love.